Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody out there. So we really appreciate you joining us today for our webinar. I'm Jenny Bailey from the Agile Business Consortium. If you haven't heard of us before, we're a not-for-profit member organisation who are leading, promoting and enabling business agility worldwide. As with all our webinars, we are recording this broadcast, so everyone who is registered will receive this recording in the follow-up email. Now, I'm sure there'll probably be lots of questions today, because when I talked to my guest this morning and when I talked to her, always there's lots of questions, and we seem to talk forever about this subject because it's such a emotive subject in lots of ways. Lots of questions are always raised. So I'm sure you will have questions once I've introduced you to Adina and we've actually gone through the presentation that we've got for you this morning. So if you've got questions, please just put them into the system, and if we have time, I'll be able to get to them after the presentation. So my guest this morning, without further ado really, is Adina Tarry. If you've never heard of her before, she's an incredible lady. She is an AI strategist, a coach, a business psychologist, and also an accomplished author. So good morning, Adina. Are you joining us? Are you there?
Good morning, Jenny, and thank you for inviting me.
No problem at all. You're very, very welcome, and I'm so pleased you are there, considering the technical problem we just had. So that's good news.
Thank you.
Now, Adina, you've worked internationally with blue chip corporations in manufacturing and supply chain, quality management. You've also done a lot of science and research-driven environments as well with information technology. So you've kind of really got a really good grasp on the understanding of that kind of thing, haven't you, and that kind of business. But then also you've really touched on now and really worked in-depthly really with people in business as an organizational consultant and a business psychologist and a professional coach. So really, regarding the topic that we're covering today, developing an adaptive self fit for the digital age, I can't think of, in all honesty, a better person to invite along to the webinar to actually present your findings on this, because I think you're very well equipped to be able to help us tackle this quite difficult subject.
Thank you, Jenny, for this introduction. And indeed, I think I'm quite lucky because I've covered in my career so far the business aspect and the people development aspect. And the reason for which I first spent time in business was because I really love the world of business. I think it's a complex, creative, and very interesting and very challenging world. On the other hand, after a couple of decades in business, I've also realized that the one thing that matters in business is the people. And no matter how much money we may spend on technology and processes, if people do not buy in and do not perform and are not engaged and motivated, then nothing happens. As things stand, my first degree was in psychology, and then I did an MBA, and then I worked in business. So after a couple of decades in business, I thought, yes, it is time for me to go back to my first love, which was people and people development. And then I did another degree in business psychology, and then I brought the two sides of this complex reality together. So I'm quite delighted when I have the option to talk about both things at the same time, because typically we tend to be labeled in either one or the other category, and this is a wonderful opportunity to bring the two together.
And you're most welcome, because like I said, I can't think of anybody really that could cover these two streams so well and in depth and to really give us clarity of understanding as yourself. So there's the profile that we've got up on the system at the moment, so you can see. Now, also we should mention you're an author as well, and you've got a fantastic book coming out, haven't you, which is Coaching with Careers and AI in Mind. A grounding and hopeful and resourceful self fit for a digital world. So it's very similar really to the webinar title, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And I'm very excited about this book because it is based on my career coaching experience of some 18 years now, with over 2,800 hours of practice, where I've met hundreds of people. And I have met them in a situation where we're talking about work, but we are talking about business, organization, and the change that happens in the wider system. And my ambition then became to put together my experience acquired in the last 18 years, but also to enable a projection into the future and make this information useful for the future, because I felt the past and the present are fine, but we are looking into the future, and I have a future-oriented mind and a strategic mind as well. So therefore I thought, yes, let us project all this knowledge into the future and make it helpful for people to adapt to our current digital world.
Fantastic. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's look into the actual topic of developing an adaptive self fit for the digital age. Obviously, as we were talking earlier, the digital age, it's not a new thing, is it? It's very much a case that the digital age was with us, probably about 10 years ago, and maybe we were a little bit slow to respond or slow to realise that it was all around us and growing rapidly.
And also, there was a case of technology not being quite up to scratch in terms of delivering on that digital ambition. We have now new processors who have enabled us to really take a quantum leap into how we apply the digital thought and the digital ambition. And you may have, to refer just to an example, you may have heard of virtual reality maybe some 20 years ago, and then it went all quiet. And the reason it went quiet was that the processing, the software processing speed was not quite up to what it needed to be. And then 20 years later, which is now, the quality of virtual reality is absolutely amazing. And I would suggest anyone who hasn't tried it to do so. But we have been able to pick up on that technology and now really sort of explore it, because technology enables us to do that. And this is the case of the digital world. We can today, we have the capability, technical capability to actually extend it and really position it very strongly.
Okay, but before we look into the adaptive self element for the digital age, like we were talking about, we really need to look at the reality of where we are now, so then we can obviously adapt and move forward, don't we? So you've got a great definition here for actually what reality is. Can you just talk us through this?
Yes, I think that I would like to position just a simple way of thinking about ourselves, which I use typically, and that is to look at the world through a bigger picture, where I look outside and I look at what surrounds me, which I call reality, and then look at myself as an individual that needs to act and exist within this context. And if we look out, reality indeed is something that happens whether we like it or not. It's everywhere, it's emergent, it changes, and it's all around us. It's an endless phenomenon that exists. Now, from an individual point of view, we relate to this context, which is not so much under our control, and we need to create our own path and our own meaning and purpose, and effectively find out how are we going to unfold our life within this context. So this whole, if you will, this whole conversation will be positioned pretty much in these two categories. And obviously the focus here is on the individual. So we are looking at the small picture. But of course, our small picture, our own existence is informed by first looking at what happens in the outside world, because that will cause in us a reaction, an adaptive reaction to it. So if we look at the outside world, it's globalized, it's very fast, it's changing. We have a lot of information which is now online. We have a mixture of generations that have different values and that need to work together and live together. We have e-commerce and basically the whole, what we call the digital world, which is the world online. And this has been made possible by a cluster of extraordinary technological advancement that started in the 80s. And if you look at all the major changes that have turned our world completely upside down, they all happened around the 1980s, and that was remote communication, the telex and the fax machine, and then the PC and the internet, and then the mobile phone and the smartphone. And all this combination of factors have made the world outside us to change, but to change at a very, very rapid pace, and with changes of enormous magnitude. So what is our response to this? Um, we experience the fact that our lives is technology driven, and people have a mobile phone in their hand 24/7.
They sure do.
They do, and this another conversation about how good or bad that may be. We, we yes, like with everything, we engage with the internet. We get ambiguous messages and all sorts of pieces of information. Some of them are true, some of them are not. We witness this incredibly fast-paced change, and the magnitude of change is very important. So the reaction to all this is really quite polarized, because there are all sorts of theories which either go towards a utopian or dystopian view of the future, because we are trying to strategize now and to think what is the world going to be like in the future, and we are a bit unable to project it clearly.
Okay, so like you're saying there, then the telescopes is looking outward, isn't it? It's about the factors that are making those changes that we're aware of, looking out, and the microscopes, just to clarify it for everybody, is really looking in. Is that right?
Yes, so the telescope is the wider view, the perspective that we cast is a lens that casts our eye outward, away from us and into the environment that's around us, to a global level and possibly to a cosmic level, if you will, because there is a lot of debris that is actually moving around the planet, and eventually we may obscure the access of sunlight to this planet, which keeps us alive. So we have expanded the universe that we need to look at. It goes well beyond my job, my home, and my small group.
Sure.
And that is the telescopic view. Whereas the microscope, and this is just a symbolic kind of lens labeling, is looking at myself, looking inwards, looking at me as an entity, but looking at the entire complexity that makes me as an individual a very complex entity, but it is analyzing, it's going in rather than going out, and then looking at how these two things can be harmonized and aligned.
Right, and then as you say, it's utopia versus dystopia. So
Yes.
it's either the greatest or a bit of a concern, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I think some people, it depends again, and it's all psychology now, but it depends on people's time orientation, and it depends on some of their personality traits and how open they are to change, etc. So yes, the reaction is usually split. I mean, the models are pretty much split. We are not used to embrace the third option, which I'm going to propose a bit later. We tend to be binary, it's this way or the other way. And I think this way of thinking is actually obsolete today. We need to embrace the third option, which is a combination of the two, which involves a little bit of a maybe as well.
Okay. All right. Well, let's look at the now, as it were. What's happening out there right now, would you say? Obviously, technology is stampeding on at a rate of we can't really keep up with right now. But like you say there, technology has far outpaced biology, which might be quite a startling fact to some of the people that are tuning in this morning.
Exactly, and I think we need to emphasize this. We acknowledge scientifically that we cannot respond to technology in the way that technology may ask us to respond. For instance, very simple example, our brain is unable to effectively multitask. Anyone who thinks that we can is mistaken. And I'm going to give you an example that is also somewhat amusing, and I'll ask the question, a rhetorical question. Can you, if you walk down the street and you have people walking in front of you, can you tell who is reading their mobile phone and who not? What do you think, Jenny? Can you tell?
You're walking down a street and you've got people walking in front of you, walking in the same direction as you, not walking towards you.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, in the same direction. So you cannot see what they do. You just see them from the back.
Absolutely.
And
Head down.
can you tell who is looking at their mobile phone and who is not looking at their mobile phone?
If you're standing behind them, no, you won't be able to tell.
I think I can. And the reason is that those who look at their mobile phones
They'll be
slow
walking in,
down.
or they'll be walking into
And you
lampposts, maybe. Yeah.
I- exactly, exactly. So if you now with this suggestion will
Sure.
pay attention, and I invite everyone. It's a game. It's quite amusing. Just as you walk out the underground or wherever you go
Mm,
in a place, just watch the people in front of you, and you are going to see that those who read their mobile phones slow down their paces, and you may run into them because you don't know that they are doing that, and you go at the same
mm,
pace,
mm-hmm,
or they stop dead. They literally suddenly stop because they are attracted by something that they've seen on the screen. So
sure.
what I'm trying to say is that biological, we cannot we cannot multitask, but what we can do is, of course, switch from one task to the other, which is I walk, then I walk slower, so I drop the efficiency of walking and I can read, then I stop reading and I walk faster because I've moved my energy to the other task.
Right.
And that takes a lot of energy, and it's tiring, and it's
Mm,
not very efficient. So biologically, we cannot keep pace with technology, but biologically, we are also the people who have created this amazing technology that is very, very fast and very efficient in many ways. And it has
mm,
been around. I mean, we have today millions of robots who work for us, many of them in supply chain and manufacturing. We also have software that runs the stock exchange, that runs call centers. We have software that reads and does selection of large number of CVs, hundreds of CVs that go into a machine, and the machine is enabled to read and select and them.
mm-hmm,
We have Google Translate. We have all sorts of applications, face recognition, biometric recognition,
mm,
medical diagnosis being done by machine, including your mobile phone, which has been in the last few years artificial intelligence enabled. So if you have a mobile phone that's no older than, I don't know, 3 years or so, that is, you are holding artificial intelligence in your hand, and all these helpers, Siri, Cortana, and so on. This is
mm,
artificial intelligence at work. So we all use it, and it's all around us.
mm. Mm. And that's the thing. I mean, a lot of it's working simultaneously with us in a way, isn't it? And we only kind of hear more about it, I guess, when things go wrong, like some of the
Yes,
financial
yes,
institutions recently, and some of the data situations that
yes.
are obviously in the news currently as well. And then it's like everyone throws their hands in the air and go, "Oh my goodness, we shouldn't be doing this necessarily," and that's when the fear kind of kicks in, I guess, of all the data that's out there and our digital footprint and all that kind of stuff that's discussed. But all the time it's going well, everything's seemingly fine, isn't it?
Exactly. And this is the people in business will understand now a business reference. And I love to make business references, particularly to quality management. Our awareness of technology is only event triggered. In
Mm,
other words, there is an
that's
event,
right.
it's not constant. There is an event which alarms us, and
Mm,
it becomes publicized. And then we say, oh dear, yes, this is
exactly.
happening.
Yeah.
I use Facebook all the time, but it never crossed my mind that
Mm,
someone is actually using my data and I don't even know about it, and
mm-hmm,
I'm feeding this data industry. So it's event triggered. However, the interesting thing is that these events have been more and more frequent, and therefore now the focus on this situation is higher than it was, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago,
mm-hmm,
because the events are more frequent, and then they come up on the news, and then we wake up from our normal routine and think, oh yes, I'm involved in this simply because I'm holding a mobile phone
exactly.
in my hand, and then
Yes.
suddenly we sort of get into a
Panicked
bit of a
almost. Yeah.
panicked and think, oh dear, what do I need to know that I don't know in order to have a position? And this is exactly what we are talking about here, is looking at myself and empowering me to have a position rather than be a passive recipient of technology that's coming like this big wave and I am powerless around it. So
Mm,
what I'm saying is that we need to wake up to the imperative of exercising agency.
mm,
We need to take a position and be aware that technology is here, that we use it every day, and then our mission should be that we need to uh, empower ourselves
mm,
to use it rather than be controlled and used by it.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So then what we are doing now is it's taking a microscope lens and looking at ourselves. So what am I capable of as myself, using myself as a resource? Because quite frankly, in an environment where there is a lot of uncertainty out there in the big world, the only place of certainty and safety is within me and my energy, my capability, my skills, and my power of taking a position. And so the idea is to look at ourselves through self-awareness, through introspection, through reflection, look at what are our capabilities, deploy them actively, and also acquire new ones in order to adapt to what is coming.
Absolutely. And that's where we exercise agency.
Exactly. Exercising agency means exercising control from a position of power and confidence to influence events actively rather than be overwhelmed.
Absolutely. Yes. It's the better position to be, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. It's the good adaptive position. And we can do that by accessing resources because we have them. Now, again, these resources sit within ourselves, and I call them personal resources. And there are external resources, and the external resources are in all the information systems and the science and the research, the psychology, the philosophy, and all the models that we can go to and reinforce our cognition and our understanding of reality. But this is the external resources are part of what I call the big picture, the telescopic view, and it is not the focus of this, our conversation today. Our focus is the microscopic view, is the lens on our personal resources. So looking at the personal resources, our biggest resource is our personality, and personality is a construct. It means that it's a label that we have created in order to deal with something that we cannot actually find as such in nature.
Right.
It's not an object. Why? Because personality is made of many, many facets. And so it cannot be captured as an object or as a phenomenon. It's a dynamic, composite, multifold element. And our personality has got aspects to it that are mainly invisible. And this is why we may talk about it with a common analogy with an iceberg, because most of the elements, the parts that make our personality, are beneath the view line. They are invisible. And so the foundation of our personality is actually very, very old. It sits on the borderline with biology.
Right.
And it is about emotions and instincts. Because as individuals, of course, our first mission, which is sort of a brainless mission, has nothing to do with the thinking and cognition, is about survival, isn't it? We are creatures, and all creatures want to survive.
Absolutely.
And that survival resource is in emotions and instincts, which help us survive. And very closely there, I have added values and beliefs. Interesting, values and beliefs actually straddle the next into the space into the next box. But because they are formed very early, and some of them are very hard to change, I have put them close to instincts and emotions, although they are a bit of a bridge into the second box of other invisible attributes. But these ones are invisible attributes that have been created not by biology, but by society.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And we can immediately see, attitudes and aspirations. If you take a human being and tell them day in, day out that they are useless, they will have no, exactly. This is an immediate consequence. They will have no aspiration. Their attitude would be defeated. They will have no motivation to do anything. You will disempower them completely. Whereas if you nurture them and you say, yes, you can do this, and aspire high,
absolutely, reach the goal.
fulfill. Yeah, exactly. So then we have motivation, and you see how nicely clustered they are, and they inform each other. And then, of course, the outcome of that is really the skills and experience which reside let's say, within us, in my own mind, my skills and experience are not visible to anyone. If I talk to a person, they wouldn't know that, I don't know, I'm a qualified internal auditor, or I worked in supply chain, or anything like that.
Sure,
They are
absolutely.
hidden, right?
And that's the same for
But
everybody,
they,
isn't it?
absolutely, yes, yes, absolutely. There is no difference in individual around that. And then again, a common feature is that the minute I start talking and the minute I behave, then people can see some of the invisible attributes that we have had in the previous two boxes on this image. So because I can tell you I'm a qualified auditor, because I have communicated with you and you have informed other people about, let's say, my business experience.
Sure.
And again, in terms of behavior, I can exercise that capability. I can behave professionally. In other words, if someone said, Adina, can you do an audit here and now? I will say yes, and I can behave and basically prove my skill and my motivation, right? So now the difficulty, of course, here is that there is much less that we see in behavior and communication than there is beneath the waterline.
Right, okay.
And the fascinating thing is that you can have the same behavior in 5 people, but their motivation, aspiration, or emotions can be completely different and sometimes opposite. Right? So this is why we talk about personality as a construct and as a complex entity, because you have all these permutations. But to conclude on this particular aspect, which in itself, I mean, the depths of possibilities to talk about this one slide is endless and is fascinating. But to conclude on this, these are capabilities that we need to relate to and become aware of and own and understand in order to display that sense of agency that we are talking about, and in order to be able to act as agents, empower agents when we deal with technology and the world around us.
Okay. So now we're going on to the complex capabilities to develop and use then. And obviously agility is in there in a big way, isn't it? But a different type of agility.
Absolutely. And the complex capability, I call them complex because indeed they are not just skills. They are made up of clusters and clusters of other individual skills, which when put together give us the possibility to do things that are a little bit more complicated. And so agility, resilience, and flexibility are 3 of such complex skills that involve many, many other elements. They are constructs in a way as well. But what I wanted, I was really sort of delighted and curious to establish is the difference between them, because we tend to, including myself, sometimes I can use this word and the other word, and the notion is generally about adaptation. Flexibility is yes, it's about adaptation, and resilience is about yes, it is, and so on. So we may throw these words in, and we express to a degree of clarity what we want to say. But in fact, if we pay attention, it's quite fascinating that each of these capabilities, in fact, defines a different state, which sometimes can be almost opposite. For instance, if we look at flexibility, it enables movement, but without breaking the core. So we have this yes and no situation, one and the other. So we have a fundamental core that stays in place, but we can flex around it, right? Resilience is about recovery and consolidation. So it is not a dynamic sort of capability, but it's rather a constant capability. It's staying in place. A storm.
Sorry, can you just say that again? It's staying in place. We just lost you for a second.
Sorry, establishing equilibrium after a storm, re-establishing a firm ground beneath our feet. So it's quite static. It's consolidating, right? And then we have agility, which is actually about the opposite. It's about movement.
Yes. Yes, sure.
So you see how beautifully we combine movement and non-movement,
Mm-hmm.
and also the states between movement and non-movement from a core that doesn't break.
Right. Okay.
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
I think there is poetry here, beyond the intellectual cognitive notions. So it's almost like having the third state, one state of movement, the other state of stability, and the third state of moving between one or the other whilst maintaining integrity.
Right. Wow. Okay.
Yes, it is. It's
It is.
philosophy. We
Yeah.
are here in poetry, in the world of poetry and philosophy, but it is true. Philosophy is everywhere, except we don't realize it. But
That's a whole
this
nother
is
webinar for another day.
it's another webinar. Yes, yes. And going back to the focus here
Yep.
again, changing without breaking, which is the flexibility
Mm-hmm.
notion. It means that you do not break if you have a solid core.
Yes.
Now, that is the solid core that we need to understand, to build, to nurture, to own, and to use when we exercise agency.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and when we express and unfold our own destiny and our own life in the wider context of reality, which is moving around us.
Okay. Okay.
Makes sense?
It does.
It brings it together.
Mm.
So these are the complex capabilities in itself. Each of them, because they are called complex, has attributes and skills that sit beneath this, and they can be unfolded and analyzed. And that's another, as you say, that's another topic for another day. So if we move from all this,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at how do I actually apply this in real life?
Okay.
Because
Sure.
some of these notions may be a bit theoretical for some people, and that is fine. But let's see how it pans out in reality. And I've created this little, 4-step I can steps into how do we engage with agency in a complex situation, starting from a strong core of
Mm.
awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's about identifying, contextualizing, analyzing, and neutralizing. And let me start with an example because that might be, more useful. Let's say that I identify an issue or a problem, which is about identifying. The problem is that I'm an accountant. I work in an organization. I may experience restructuring, and I'm not quite sure about my job. So this is a problem. This makes me anxious.
Yes.
Why? Because technology comes in,
Yes.
and I may be, yes, exactly. So
Quite disrupting,
this
isn't
is
it, obviously?
exactly. So then that issue I contextualize in the bigger world. Okay, so I'm anxious about my job because of technology. Let me look out
Mm-hmm.
in the market and find out, are there other companies that have replaced people with artificial intelligence? Are there jobs in the market for accountants? How much do they pay? Where are they? What kind of content of work there is? So it's about researching telescopically, let's say, looking out
Hmm.
at the world and trying to find out what's going on around my problem in the market, in the outer world.
And I guess in a way that would give you reassurance, wouldn't it?
Well, maybe not,
Mm.
because it will give you reassurance in the sense of of understanding whether the problem is a real problem or
Yes.
not.
Sure.
Absolutely, yes, you're absolutely right. In the sense of uncertainty, it will eliminate uncertainty and replace it with the certainty.
Mm.
So that gives you a very useful piece of information. The other way of looking at that is analyzing and looking inward. So if I lose my job,
Mm.
and if there is a threat to that, what are these implications for me and my family and my entire situation?
Mm-hmm.
And analyze and look at it in detail. And the next step is, okay, I'm going to neutralize this situation by using the information that I've acquired through these previous 3 steps and work on a solution. For instance, I may find out that there are plenty of jobs in the market,
Mm-hmm.
and that if I lose this job, I will need to earn that amount of money because I have obligations towards my family. and this is the impact. And then the neutralizing the situation is, okay, so what am I going to do? I'm going to start looking proactively or reactively at a new job, because I know there are plenty in the market, and
Okay.
I need to find it because I need to support my family. The opposite may happen, and I may go out, contextualize, and find out that yes, everyone else in the market is replacing people by artificial intelligence. Then analyze the impact and say, goodness me, this is not good because I have obligations, I need to earn that much money, and then neutralize it by saying, okay, so what can I do now in order to rescue this situation and proactively prepare myself for this change?
I think that's a really good element
And
to make, actually, the fact that it is proactively. It's looking at it as almost like a positive lens of, there's this challenge, let's overcome it, what can I do? I think that's a really good point. You don't, the I can steps are there to put into practice and to think positively about, because like we were saying before about change, this isn't the first change that humans have had to kind of take on, is it? We're very adaptive in our race, aren't we?
absolutely. And I think, yes, the emphasis on proactive is very important. And I will give examples from my career coaching experience, where I have worked with people in this situation. And what has happened, quite interestingly, is that they have started to proactively look for new jobs, thinking that their company may be restructuring. And they ended up in a situation where, at the time when they are indeed restructured and hopefully received some financial package as a result of their tenure in that position, they also started the next day a new job, uh, which is a wonderful outcome for a situation which initially would have been very very difficult and of great concern. Um, there is this theory, and I've had the privilege. I do a lot of, CPD, and at one of the presentation, I met Charles Handy, who, as people may know, is the father of the management theory, and he was saying, which, and we completely agree, that organizations, he was talking about organization in that case, but I think individuals should embrace this model too, is about the fact that we need to start thinking about the future when we are at the peak of our current activity, and not when we are in decline. Because when we are in decline, we are weakened in terms of resources, energy, and so on, and it may be a bit late. But as you are at the peak of your activity as a company or as an individual, you could look around and just keep an eye on the outer world, on the context, and try to find out where things are going. Because if you are proactively, maybe 1 or 2 years ahead of the wave, and you can read the signs, you can prepare to neutralize the possibility of a situation that comes. And research has demonstrated that people respond much better to change which is planned and where they have a say and a choice in it, rather than something that's inflicted on them.
Of course. Yes, of course. No one likes the having change inflicted on them. And
Yeah.
there's a whole industry around this in change management, isn't there? We're all individuals
Yes.
at the end of the day, and we like to be treated as well as decently as possible, really. And we all take change in a different way. Some people, there's a
Yes.
huge resistance. Other people are quite excited by the prospect. And yes, that there's lots of papers written about this subject. Like I said, there's a whole industry about it. So it's interesting, though,
Yes.
with these steps, the proactive attitude, and like you say, looking ahead once you are in a good place, once you're in a great position, and then looking and keeping an awareness there, if you like, of what could be coming. Really, I think we all need to play that part, really, don't we?
Absolutely. And I think this takes us, and I'll just make a quick mention of that, but it's another subject which is very interesting and a little bit, larger than the time we've got here. But it is about the fact that actually the tenure in one job in the future, well, it has decreased anyway. It's now 2 or 3 years, whereas 10, 20 years ago, it was 5 to 10 years. Now it's 1 to 3 years. And we'll end up having, a succession of careers and jobs. And with the breakdown of the boundaries around professions and so on, we'll end up having to be extremely flexible and just moving from one, there is this notion of gig economy, from one gig to another, from one situation of employment to the next. So really looking ahead and trying to map a little bit of a path and looking constantly at your skills and what you can redeploy or deploy in the future and acquire on the run, as it were, will come in very, very handy in the future.
Absolutely. It just makes it sound to me that things are speeding up even more, and some people are thinking, how can it speed up anymore? We're going flat out already.
Yes, but it is. It will speed up
and
even
it will. Absolutely.
more.
We'll all adapt to it,
Absolutely.
won't we?
It will. Everything is going to happen. As I say, reality happens whether you like it or not, everywhere, all the time. So it's happening. So what we need to do is to keep an eye on it, looking out,
and be ready,
and to also be ready and rally our own resources. So moving on from here, we can look at how can we successfully achieve the utilization of all the aspects that we have discussed up to now. And I think the most successful outcome results when we do align our cognitive and thinking capability with our ethics and our emotions. And again, very simple example. Let's say that my job is at risk and there are plenty of jobs out there of activities which I find reprehensible, but pay lots of money.
Right.
Right. So then the question is, am I going to take those options? And I suppose for most people, the answer is no. Why? Because emotionally and ethically, we may be repelled by those possibilities. And I have these conversations all the time. We talk all the time, just generally or professionally. And people say, I would never do this job. I would never work for such and such a company. And you may have heard that too. I'm sure that we all have heard that. So what happens is that if we, to be happy and to be successful, we need to align these three things. Otherwise, somewhere along the way, sooner or later, things will unravel and we will be unhappy, we will become less productive, and eventually we will leave. A lot of people who engage initially saying, oh, this is a great company and pays lots of money and I don't care if there is a little bit of ethical compromise involved because I need this situation, will a few months later find themselves so despondent and so discouraged and quite frankly sometimes depressed to the point where they will resign, even though initially they felt, oh, there is no big deal, I just close my eyes, look the other way. But in reality, we are influenced emotionally and ethically about things that we do not feel are right. So one way of doing that is also engaging our thinking. And we were talking earlier about the amount of information that comes our way, and half of it, at least, we could make an assumption that it is false. It is not true. We are being manipulated. We are being told things that are not correct. Yet, if we do not cognitively check through our thinking, does this sound right? Do I know that the information I work with and use my thinking processes to make rational decisions, is this correct? Is my thinking correct in relation to that? Can lead to very difficult and negative consequences. And we were talking earlier, and everyone knows about, for instance, manipulating elections. Now, imagine in countries where regions in the world where there are dictators and you can manipulate elections to elect a dictator. The impact on the population is horrendous.
Absolutely.
But it's just, but the individual can say in good faith, well, this information was put in front of me. I believed it. I voted this way. And now I'm confused. So part of exercising agency is also an obligation that we have to verify the information around which we make our decisions, and then to have our thinking, our ethics, and our emotions in alignment. If we do that, then the choices we make and the strengths of our core from which we flexibly adapt is going to be untarnished and is going to be consolidated. And I think this is something that we need to keep in mind. We should never underestimate the way ethics and emotions, which remember are at the foundation of our personality and happen in the background, can erode our happiness if we do not pay attention to that. They just work in the background nicely and slowly and create this increasing wave of disenchantment and despondence and undermine us because they are alive and ticking, and they are playing a part. They are saying, this is wrong, why are you involved here? But of course they do it in
It's just that
a sort
niggle.
of
It's just that niggle, isn't it? It's just that thing
yes,
on your shoulder, sort of, whispering in your ear
yes,
every now and then and saying, yeah, this isn't quite right.
yes. Wonderfully put, and that can we know this, the saying that a small pebble can derail a train and so on.
Yes.
This is exactly, it's the little ethics and emotions are that tiny pebble that can really disrupt completely all our decision and lead us to failure, when in fact we thought we made the right decision based on the belief that our thinking is correct, because the information we use in making choices is correct.
Okay. So it's about, like you say, confirming, looking at the ethics, the emotions, getting that agency right, that self, to be adaptive, for the
Yes.
future and what's coming. So should we go through to the calls to action now then?
Well, the calls to action are there. Yes, exactly. They are there because I'm trying to wrap up now. All this. There is a quite rich. I'm aware of that. There is. This is quite a rich sort of conversation. But
Yes.
believe you me, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We can have books written by all these topics, and many webinars. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I try to just give the headlines. But to bring them together, what I'm saying is we need to move into embracing the third option, which is not utopia and dystopia, but which is looking at the future with hope. What does it mean, hope? It means that we are predicting and we believe that things will be okay. It doesn't mean that they will, but we are working towards this outcome, and we are going to put all our effort into doing that, because we can't really predict 100% what happens in the future. But if we stay hopeful and engage and exercise agency, chances are we increase the possibility of the future really turning out well.
Absolutely.
Now, if we exercising agency and choices is enabled by you being present, being aware, and being there for yourself, for others, and for the world. And that means being there and present and self-aware for yourself in order to maintain your well-being, your equilibrium, to be agile, to be flexible, to respond well to the outside world. Being there for others, of course, enforces your strengths, because we are designed to be social creatures, and there is strength in numbers. And we know that isolation and solitude kills people just like any other disease. Literally, it literally kills people, and that's because we are designed to be with others, and we can collaborate and create better outcomes with other people together. And be there for the world in terms of what position do we take, if any, around what's happening globally. And it could be something as simple as recycling our plastics, or paper, or not consuming too much of this or the other, and not contributing to depleting some resources on the planet. So that's our involvement with society at a wider level. Now, looking on the other hand at our human potential and looking at complex capability, I've only put on a slide further before 3 of them, but there are many more. And curiosity is something that is absolutely, the key to our progress and civilization. It is because we are curious that we have, discovered continents and created so many artifacts of culture and civilization. Having hope, again, is a very human attribute. Hope keeps us alive in times of adversity, because we really think that, yes, there may be a chance of things being positive at the end of this ordeal, whatever, challenge that we experience. knowing your emotions and using them, emotions are extremely powerful sources of energy. And we need to know how to use those emotions, because sometimes emotions can work against our better judgment, can
Sure.
derail us, can prevent us from doing the right thing. You know, we see red in front of our eyes. That's an emotion that actually stops us from, you know, it may cause us to fall and stumble on an obstacle which we suddenly don't see.
Mm-hmm.
But when we use joy and love, which are the two key basic positive emotions, we grow wings, so to speak, and they can carry us. Positive emotions can carry us through achievement. Again, staying connected to others, and last but not least, finding meaning and purpose. Um, we have the possibility of higher thinking capability. We have high cognition, and we, at any level, the simplest level, we constantly try to find meaning and purpose to our life, whether people feel that their mission is to have a family, or to to have a beautiful garden, or to at the most simple level,
Mm.
people do create meaning and purpose and express it in various ways. It can be extremely sophisticated and high concept, or it can be just simple in everyday life. My purpose is to be kind, is to
Mm.
help others. It can be
Mm.
as simple as that. But people are empowered by having a purpose, and then their whole corridor
Mm.
and the way their life unfolds becomes meaningful and becomes satisfactory.
Okay, so that's the calls to actions. That's what we've got to. That's putting the third choice, really, isn't it? Like you say, that's
Yes,
blending the third option there as well. So
yes,
to summarize, then it really is the to be developing the adaptive self. It really is all about, obviously, the self,
yes,
how you take on new opportunities, what you believe, your emotions, your ethics, everything that, I mean, like you say, it is a huge iceberg of a topic to actually cover, and to cover it in 40 minutes, we have scratched the surface. There's so many white papers, books, and further webinars that we could do on this. Definitely, I'm convinced about that, because we are such a complex creature, aren't we?
absolutely. And I think the message here is a hopeful message. I'm a hopeful person. I
Yeah.
always believe that, there is a solution and there is a way to do something better. And the message here is to really not neglect the enormous resource that we have within ourselves, except that maybe we do not have the habit or the discipline or the interest to self-reflection and to surfacing all those attributes and all those drivers and all those capabilities that we have, and then really use them with full awareness, full sense of agency, and with a good purpose that will turn our life into something else and will make it more successful regardless of what comes our way. And this is my positive message: is technology is fine. Technology has got many wonderful positive applications.
Mm.
It's not going to go away. It's going to become increasingly part of our lives. So let us embrace it. Let us hope that it's going to turn out for the good, but let us prepare, starting with ourselves as
Mm.
a resource, in order to embrace and proactively work with technology for the greater good and for our own fulfillment as individuals.
I couldn't have said it better. I think that absolutely covers it, really, doesn't it? In terms of the objective that we had for the webinar, and what we needed to cover. I think you're right, and it's a very interesting insight, really, into ourselves and what we need to do, and to kind of keep a check on ourselves, really. I think that's what I've learned from this webinar, and the hope. I mean, that's just a basic human um, instinctive emotion, really, isn't it? We are creatures of hope, and we are creatures of being curious. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have got to this
Yes.
point anyway in our technology, would we? It's the fact that we've been curious that has led to where we are today, because we've kept adapting things and working with things and learning more. And the digital age has come about because of our curiosity. I mean, you could say, couldn't you?
Absolutely, absolutely. Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. It's absolutely that. Our civilization today is the result of roughly 7,000 years of recorded
Right.
civilization and artifacts, and it builds historically on the previous, discoveries and the previous curiosity and the previous achievements and the technology that it has progressed alongside all the other things that have progressed as well in terms of everything else. Our society today is a society that is very, very different from even the Middle Ages, which is only a few hundred years ago.
Mm.
So yes, I think we need to embrace hope, and to believe, really believe that we've got resources that we haven't tapped into, and we better do that because we can. We can do that.
Mm. Brilliant. Well, we're going on to questions now. There's a few questions that are coming through, but also I wanted to mention that obviously we've been covering off the self very much today, or starting on the tip of that iceberg and working our way through it as much as we can in the time allowed. But I should mention that Adina is very kindly going to be presenting at the Agile Business Conference on the 26th and 27th of September. So you're joining us on our 16th year of conference, which is just fabulous, Adina. So thank you.
Thank you.
And you're really going to be tackling, aren't you, that the whole sort of question of this, but looking at the organisation, how an organisation is going to be coping with the new technology, and we've been obviously concentrating on the self with the ethics, the emotions, and everything. But obviously that there's a huge shift that's when we're going to be looking at an organisation, and that's going to take you into your presentation, obviously, for the conference.
Exactly, and that is the other side of, as I was saying initially, that is moving from the small picture to the big picture. It's moving into the strategy, into the telescope, into the bigger lens. What's going on out there in the world and what's going on in the world of business generally. It's the big picture, is the context, and it's the other side of this one coin, which is the self and the outer world.
Okay, fantastic. Well, we are actually running out of time, so I don't know if we've got time for questions. There are a few coming through. There's a few that are just really saying, can we just get a summary? And I think the summary you put forward was just fantastic in terms of the emotion, the ethics, everything we've discussed really in those last two slides. Obviously, all the slides in the presentation and the recording will all be available to everyone who's registered, and I will be sending it out. So feel free to go over the notes that we've laid out for you in this presentation. Also, I think it's true to say that the presentation is for reference, obviously, after the broadcast, like I just said. So we have loaded these slides up with lots of information for you. So you can, by all means, use that as a reference point when we're looking at this, when you're looking at this subject again. I'm very much looking forward to the conference and hearing of the other side, Adina, like you're saying, the actual organisational side. I think it's going to come into the government side of it in terms of the governing structure, if you like, in an organisation and how they're coping. And it's like top down, bottom up, isn't it? It's like everybody, obviously, it's another paradigm shift, I think, really, isn't it? It's very similar to transformations in a way.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we are talking about another stage of capitalism altogether and rethinking capitalism to include all these technological changes and what does it need to be as a new model. And within that, we are talking about an economic system, macroeconomics, and then the organization supporting that other, potentially other model of doing business.
Absolutely.
So it's very exciting and very interesting.
It is. It's fascinating, and it has been fascinating. I'm sharing this webinar with you today. Like I said, it's always an interesting conversation when we chat, and sometimes you just blow my mind with your knowledge and your experience and your analogies of what you can put together and how seamlessly you can build the technology with the people elements and bring it all together in terms of how we are coping. And it's the psychology of it, really, isn't it? That's what it comes down to, like we were just saying.
Thank you so much, Jenny. And I confess I do enjoy my conversations with you. It seems that our brains may be also wired in a similar way. So we have this good exchange where we learn from each other and we influence each other's thoughts. And I think that's the joy, going back to positive emotions, is the joy and the experience of doing something together with other people, the connectivity that that is caused by this.
Well, that's a wonderful compliment. I'm taking that completely, and I'll try and get my head outside this office in a minute, see if I can fit through the door. But no, that's wonderful. Thank you very much. Okay, so I guess we really should close up because we're coming just past the hour now. So our webinars are getting a little bit longer. We do try and keep it to the 45-minute section, and obviously then take questions. But like I said, these slides will be coming out to you. So again, thank you so much for your time this morning, Adina, for joining us and giving us such an insightful, in-depth look into the adaptive self and how we can really take on the digital age that we've created for ourselves, really, and moving forward from there, and with hope, expectancy, and trust, I guess, in a way as well. Like all those emotions that we've been talking about. So again, thank you very much for your time, and everybody listening, thank you for joining us on the series of the Agile Business Consortium webinar series. This will be added to the resources section on the website in due course. But for now, from me, thank you very much. The website webinars will be continuing, and if you can just look out on the website for the next one, that's probably the best idea. I'm planning a lot more with really interesting topics. So if you've got some more ideas of exactly what you'd like us to be covering in our website topics, webinar topics, then please do send that through to me at jenny@agilebusiness.org. But for now, from this morning, from Adina and myself, thank you very much for listening. It's been wonderful to share this with you today. So goodbye from me.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenny, and thank you everyone else for making the time to join us this morning. Thank you.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.